Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand the process and procedure which is required to amend the Constitution of India, which is given in Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. Now, the reason why we have picked up this particular article for our today's discussion is because of the Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha yesterday had taken up three important bills, which is largely aimed to ensure 33% of women reservations in Lok Sabha as well as State Legislative Assembly, and this should be done at the earliest possible time, that is before the 2029 elections. Now, these three bills includes a constitutional 131st Amendment Bill which seeks to amend the earlier passed Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam of 2023, and it is aimed to expedite the women's reservation. Similarly, there is a delimitation bill which seeks to create a delimitation commission which will delimit the various constituencies of Lok Sabha and Raj Sabha based on the latest population figures. Now, the latest population figures that the government has with itself right now, it is not the census 2011, it is not the census 2021, rather it is the census 2011, and that is why the government is trying to expedite the delimitation process. And the third, it is a bill which will extend women's reservation to union territories where there is a legislative assembly. Okay, so what do you need to do is in the comment section, do let me know which are the union territories in India which presently has a legislative assembly. Okay, now what I'm about to say is that the topic which we are going to cover today, Article 368, it is very important from your UPSC exams perspective, because in past few years, the question on this topic has been appeared thrice in the UPSC Prelims exam. So to download the notes which I will be using in our today's class, you can go to a Telegram channel called as ATS Live and download them. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. Okay, so let us start by understanding why do you need to amend the Constitution in the first place. Now, Constitution of India, or for that matter any country, it is like a living document which must be relevant for a very long period of time. So that is why the Constitution must be amended from time to time in order to adjust itself according to changing conditions as well as the needs. And therefore, the procedure to amend the Constitution on one hand should be easy enough so that the legislature of that country can do it. But at the other hand, it should be rigid enough so that no amendment can be done without any large thinking, right? So no amendment can be done impulsively, that is the requirement, but amendment should be done with a fairly strict procedure. And that is why Indian Constitution, the amendment process itself is neither very flexible nor very rigid, rather it is a combination of both of them. So why am I saying it is not rigid nor flexible? You'll get to understand when we cover this video in its entirety, right? So let us start by understanding what are the various ways through which, or the processes through which you can amend the Constitution. Now, there are many provisions in the Indian Constitution which can be amended with a very simple process. You can amend many provisions in the Indian Constitution through a majority of members of each houses who are present and voting, very much in a similar way of how you pass an ordinary law. Now, this process is called as a simple majority of the parliament. Once again, what is a simple majority? It is nothing but the majority of members who are present and voting. So, even if there are 200 members in Lok Sabha and more than 50% of them, that is 101 members, vote for a particular amendment, this can be done. Right? Now, what can you do, or what amendments can you do through this simple majority of parliament? Let me tell you. For example, admission, establishment or formation of new states, or alteration of existing states by changing their boundaries or names can be done through simple amendment. That is why recently, when the name of the state Kerala was changed to Kerala, it was done through this process only. Similarly, abolition and creation of legislative councils in the state, amending second schedule which provides for allowances, emoluments and privileges to various constitutional functionaries can be done in the same way. So can be the use of official language. Even many important provisions like citizenship, elections to parliament and state legislature, delimitation of constituencies, amendment to 5th and 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution which deals with administration of areas where there are majority of scheduled tribes remaining. All of this can be done through this very simple process. But what you need to understand for our today's discussion is when a simple change is made to the constitution, which I am calling right now as amendment, through a simple majority, it is not covered under Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. So you must be thinking, what is Article 368 of the Constitution? So let us understand that. Now, Article 368 of the Constitution, it is mentioned in Part 20th of the Constitution, and it deals specifically with the powers of the Parliament to amend the procedure, amend the Constitution, and at the same time it also describes the procedure the Parliament and the functionaries need to follow in order to amend the Constitution. On one hand, this Article 368 says that Parliament, using its constituent power, not legislative power, using its constituent power, may make amendments to the Constitution. What kind of amendments? Parliament can make addition, make variation to various provision, or even repeal any provision of the Constitution using the procedure and process given in Article 368 of the Constitution, right? So let us try to understand, according to Article 368, what is the process you need to follow in order to make amendments to the Constitution. Now, the first process that comes to my mind is relating to certain amendments to various important provisions. First, election to the president and the manner in which the elections is held. Second is the extent of executive power, which is to be divided between union as well as state governments. Third is Indian higher judiciary, Supreme Court, High Courts. Amendment done to Goods and Services Tax Council, GST Council, which itself is a constitutional body. Similarly, the distributive power of legislative or distribution of legislative powers between the two levels of the Indian polity, that is the central as well as state governments, which is mentioned in 7th schedule of the Constitution. If you make any changes to it, this is covered by this very specific process. What is the process? I'm going to tell you, don't worry. Similarly, the representation of states in parliament, how many seats in Lok Sabha will be given to a particular state, is covered under it, as in addition to the changes in Article 368 itself. So if you are making changes in Article 368, that is also covered under Article 368 of the Constitution. So all of this, can you realize the specific trend in all of these provisions? These provisions deal with the federal character of Indian states, where interest of both center as well as state government lies. So this process can't be made very simple, right? And exactly this is what the Constitution also tells us. Constitution tells us that to amend all of these previous slides, provisions of the Indian Constitution, to make that amendment, you need to go through a specific process. This process is called as a special majority, along with ratification of the half of state legislatures. Right? So to amend all of these provisions of the Indian Constitution, which I specifically have mentioned in this slide, you need to follow a specific provision. That is, this bill, when introduced in either houses of the parliament, needs to be passed by a special majority of the parliament, and it also needs to be sent for ratification of at least half of the state legislatures in India. And if other half of the state legislature do not approve of it or do not say anything about it, even then this bill would be considered to have passed the formality of ratification by half of the state legislature, right? One more thing that you need to understand, there is no time limit within which these state legislatures need to give their ratification, right? Now you must be thinking, what is this special majority? I told you about simple majority. Simple majority, once again, is more than 50% of members present and voting. So how different is special majority from simple majority? Let us understand this. And this is given in other half of Article 368, specifically Article 368(2). Article 368(2) says that the majority provisions of the Constitution can be amended by what is called as a special majority of parliament. And what is a special majority of parliament? Special majority of parliament, it actually means a majority of total membership of each houses, and not or, and the majority of 2/3 of members who are present and voting at a given period in the house. So what I want to say, to fulfill the special majority, both this first condition and the second condition needs to be simultaneously met, and this is what is the meaning of the word "and" here. It is not written "or", had it been written or, which meant one or two must have been fulfilled, but it is given and, that means 1 and 2 both at the same time. These two condition needs to be filled, and that is what is called as a special majority of the parliament. Now, the expression of total membership here means the total membership of the house. It does not take into account vacancies or absentees of the MPs who are not present at a given point of time in the parliament, right? So it means majority of total membership. In case of Lok Sabha, it will be majority of 543 members of the parliament, right? So this is what you need to fulfill in order to qualify what is called as a special majority of the parliament. Now, there are two ways to amend the constitution, which we have already covered. One is through simple majority, not covered in Article 368, where you can make changes in many provisions. Second is when you have to make changes to the federal character of the country, and for that you need to pass that bill through special majority of parliament and ratify it with at least half of the legislatures. And the third process, which I am going to tell you now, requires just passing of the bill through both houses of the parliament using a special majority. So what can be changed using a special majority only without the ratification of the state? It is basically fundamental right given in part 3 of the constitution, and it is DPSP, Directive Principle of State Policy, given in part 4 of the constitution. And all the provisions which I mentioned not covered in the first and second categories can be amended using just the special majority of parliament, not required whether you have to send it to the ratification of the state legislatures. Okay, so this is what is the process of amendment. Now let us understand what is the procedure of the amendment of the Indian Constitution. Now if you have to amend any constitution, the Indian Constitution specifically, you can introduce a bill in either house of the parliament, that is either in Lok Sabha or in Raj Sabha. A bill to amend the constitution can be introduced. What you need to remember is that this need not be introduced in the state legislature. So if you want to amend the constitution, a bill has to be introduced in parliament in either houses but not in state legislature. Second, this bill can be introduced either by a minister or by a private member. So basically it means any MP in Lok Sabha or Raj Sabha can introduce this particular bill to amend the constitution, and to introduce this bill they do not require the prior approval of the President of India. So this is another very important provision or procedure that you have to remember. Then when this bill is introduced in either house of the parliament, each house must pass this bill separately. Now there must also be a condition. What if both of these houses don't agree whether they want to amend the bill or they want to pass the bill just in its original form? Then what will happen? Is there a process of joint sitting in this case? The answer is no. In case both of these houses disagree on passing of this bill, there is no provision of a joint sitting. So in case without any approval of these two houses, if the bill gets jammed, it gets deadlock, this deadlock won't be able to solve. So to pass this bill, both of these houses will have to agree on just one thing, because there is no provision of joint sitting in case of a constitutional amendment bill. Now let us talk about what if this bill gets passed by both houses of the parliament. Then in case if this bill does not require the ratification of state legislature, or in this case if it requires ratification of state legislature, you have to get that after ratification of the state legislature or after passing of both of the bills or of the bills in both houses of the parliament. The bill will be presented to whom? To the President of India for his or her signature, right? Now when the President receives the constitutional amendment bill for their assent called as signature, this assent must be given by the President of India. President of India here does not have the power to withhold or to deny the assent to this bill, or he does not even have the power to return this bill for the reconsideration of the parliament like in case of ordinary laws. So here the powers of President with respect to a constitutional amendment bill is somewhat limited as compared to an ordinary law, right? Now if President gives the assent to the bill, naturally this bill would become an act and the Constitution of India would be considered to have been amended as on the basis of the terms given in the act. So this is what is the procedure for amendment of the Constitution bill. To amend the Constitution, you need to introduce a bill where in either houses of the parliament, not in state legislature. When you introduce this bill in the either house of the parliament, you do not require prior permission of the President. And who can introduce this bill? either a minister or a private member bill, right? So basically any MP can introduce this bill. Now when this bill is introduced in either house of this parliament, these needs to be passed separately, and in case of a deadlock, there is no possibility of a joint sitting. Now if the bill passes through the parliament and if need be through the state legislatures, then this bill will be presented to the president, who must give assent to this bill. They do not have the power to return this bill for reconsideration, or they do not have the power to not give the assent on this bill. And when the president gives the assent, the bill would be considered to become an act and the constitution itself will get amended, right? So this is the procedure of the amendment. Now this is all for today's discussion. There are questions which I have attached to this slide which we'll solve, but there is one important announcement. Now the topic which I covered right now is a very important part of Indian polity. Indian polity in general is a very important subject of UPSC, because in prelims somewhere between 17 to 18 questions every year definitely for sure comes from polity. Besides polity, there are other 3 more important subjects: economy, geography, as well as history. And besides these 4 important subjects that I named right now, there are some minor subjects also which you require to prepare for prelims, mains, as well as interview. Every important subject, every subject, classes, test series, mentorship is available in Resolution Plus batches. In Resolution batches, we teach you everything which you require from prelims to mains to interview. That is why the name P2I is given here. To take admissions in the April batch, which is going to start from 27th of April, just go to our website, and before making the payment, if you apply the code ATS Live, you are going to get maximum discounts, and these discounts are available for batches which is for students looking to give exams in 2027 as well as the students who are looking to give exams in 2028. The same goes for here also. If you apply the code ATS Live, you are going to get maximum discounts. Please remember, this batch is going to start from 27th of April. So do not miss out on this important time. This is very crucial. Get the admissions as soon as possible and start your journey towards completing your dream. That is getting selected in the UPSC, right? Now let us consider the 2 questions that have appeared recently in the exam. First, which appeared just last year itself. Consider the following subjects under the Constitution. List 1, that is Union List under 7th schedule, extent of executive power of the state and conditions to the governor office. For a constitutional amendment with respect to which of the above 3 will the ratification of legislature of not less than 1/2 of the states is required before the bill is presented to the president for their assent? Please do let me know the correct answers in the comment section. This should be easy because we have just covered the topic right now. And one more question which appeared few years back in 2022. Consider the following statements. These are the 3 statements which you need to solve. Do let me know the correct answer to both of these questions in the comment section. And once again, if you want to download the notes, these will be made available after the video ends on this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. So this is all from my side for today. Please have a very good night and do let me know what do you feel about the amendment procedure of the Indian Constitution. Does Indian Parliament has infinite powers to amend the Constitution, or there is some limitation? Also do let me know that. Okay, so this is all from my side. Please have a very good night.